Hi guys, welcome to Ask an Innovator, where today we're going to dive deep into the mind, body, and soul of Clint Harris. 2018, this is the first episode of 2018, and I couldn't think of a better guest to have than this gentleman right here. Truthfully, as most of you know by now, this show is built around innovation. The trials, the tribulations, the successes, the failures of innovation. Innovation transcends the idea of anything other than change. And we're here to talk about change. Before the show was really created, I made one phone call to one person, and that was Clint Harris. And I said, Clint, I got this idea. I want to talk about innovation. I want to talk about change in our great community. What should I do? Without Clint, we wouldn't be here today. I'm going to do a brief little monologue I'm going to attempt to read here. Here we go. Innovation is change. The man sitting across from me has made a life out of pushing for change, the encouragement and potential for a better tomorrow, whatever that may be. The following are key concepts Clint and I might talk about today. We might talk about fundraising, we might talk about fun, we might talk about fishing, detachment, disconnection, death threats. We're going to talk about death threats today. We might talk about being a crooner, a culinarian, and courage. And just before we got going, maybe boxing might weigh on it. Clint, thank you for being here. You are a lifelong resident of Thunder Bay. Talk about Thunder Bay yesterday and Thunder Bay today.
Well, thanks for having me, Cole. I mean, it's exciting to be here and seeing Janice, and it's been a while since I've been in this building. Yes, I am a lifelong resident. I moved away for about 12 years. I'm a Fort William boy. You know, the separation between Fort William and Port Arthur still exists for me. I grew up downtown Fort William and spent my time going to McKellar School and Franklin School, and grew up with a single mom and a brother and a sister, and pretty much fought my way through grade 7, grade 8, and into high school.
Like literally fought your way?
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, Thunder Bay back in the day, decisions were made over these sometimes, right?
I lived in a tough neighborhood, and where I went to school was fairly tough, so martial arts and boxing became a big part of my life, so I could take care of myself. I was a small guy, so did everything I could to
They're the most dangerous.
take care of myself that way.
Yeah.
I still live in Fort William now, and I try not to cross Arthur Street too much. Basically, I'm probably going to be a Fort William boy my entire life.
So is Fort William West Fort?
Actually, no, but I do own a house in West Fort, and I lived there for a while, but it's anything on the south side of Arthur Street is sort of my hood.
Yeah.
I'm after 12 years of living away, I've certainly learned that the quality of life in Thunder Bay is spectacular, and the ability to get around, living in bigger cities and that sort of thing. Thunder Bay, we talk about 12 minutes to get to work as opposed to a couple hours. So I encourage people to come to Thunder Bay, and obviously our community does as well. And what they would find out if they came here is that we're a tight-knit, close community, and we take care of each other. And over the years, I graduated from Carleton University with a couple of psych degrees, and did what I could to educate myself, and traveled around Ontario for a while, working at 3 different colleges, teaching psychology and sociology and criminology and that sort of thing. So kind of from where I came from to what I ended up doing that way was a surprise to a lot of people, being that I used to run one of the tougher bars in the city in the in-towner days, and people were quite surprised to see my sort of transformation. But everybody moves forward in the way that they can, and in moving back to Thunder Bay, I worked with my mother, who owned a business, an agricultural business, and we own a resort out at a lake. So I spent it probably a year or so doing that, and then somebody asked me if I'd like a job doing facilitating and working with the newspaper, and 24 years later, here I am, a veteran newspaper guy.
Thunder Bay, born and made. I find it so fantastic that you're that grassroots story. It's totally amazing. I was sitting in the sauna the other day at one of the gyms that I go to, and a young guy, 20 years old, suggested to me that he just came back from Toronto and he would never want to visit Toronto again because he loves Thunder Bay so much. When I was 20 years old, everybody wanted to get out of Thunder Bay. Now it seems like people are not wanting to leave, or they're clamoring to get in. Has Thunder Bay changed since you were 20 years old?
Well, I think what I learned by living away is the acceptance of diversity is a lot different from which I guess we could call a blue collar sort of town. I think diversity and acceptance and things like that have improved here. But in traveling, you don't see a lot of what you see here in the tensions and the challenges of people sort of getting along. Where I do think it's getting better, but we do have some challenges, and I think it's good if people can actually leave Thunder Bay and see what it's like in a bigger city or in a different country and learn to understand the differences. Coming back after 12 years, things had changed a little. Obviously, the downtown cores became sort of combined together with the intercity sort of changes. The industry has changed with regards to forestry and things like that. So employment has moved in the direction of more white collar, with the new hospital, the new law school, and with the medical school, and the foundations with St. Joe's, and there seems to be a lot of people working really hard to make the city a better place. So that's encouraging, and I've really enjoyed being back. Everything that I do now, besides my day job, is getting out there and putting my foot forward and trying to help out. So, and I see a lot of people doing the same thing. So it's a nice change.
We are here to talk about innovation, and we're here to talk about the creative process that goes into innovation. Something I've been really dying to ask you since I met you, not to talk about politics, but why haven't you gone into politics?
Well, I mean, for one thing, I think John Tory told me once that you'll want to have made your money before you get into politics. I run a daily newspaper, and it's an important sort of aspect of our community. Obviously, the newspaper's been around over 100 years. So we have a number of people who count on this newspaper, and a number of employees who count on me making sure that we can continue to produce one. People ask me about politics all the time. I think there's a time for it. Right now, my time is to take care of the things that I'm doing. My day job keeps me busy with the newspaper, but I've been involved with the hospital since the inception of the hospital, during the Care Beyond Compare campaign, and then moving forward into working with the foundation for about 15 years. And most recently, in the last few years, I transitioned over to the chair of the Research Institute, and doing everything that we can to make sure that the people get the quality of care that they need here. And that's been my general goal, is to continue to work with the people that I work with and provide that sort of care. And you got to step forward and do it.
Sure.
Besides working with the hospital, I mean, I've been the chair with the School Board Foundation for the Lakehead School Board for 12 or 13 years, and we provide money for scholarships and aid to schools and award excellence sort of programs, and that type of thing is very rewarding to me, and you get to see the results of it. So helping out here, helping out there, the auditorium, I've been with them for about 20 years, and
amazing.
It's show business, so I kind of love that, and I keep myself running on the thin line most of the time, but what you get out of it is important to me. And what we see now in our community is the growth in almost all of those areas: education with the university, and with the college, and the hospital, and the research, and NASM. All of those things are growing, and we're attracting people from all across the world, with the university being the #1 research sort of university. I go to their awards, and you're meeting people who are from everywhere across the world, wondering why they're in Thunder Bay. But from what I've seen in the last 20-some years, is continuous growth in caring and moving
That's
forward.
amazing. What I'm hearing is a push for change without being a politician. It is true. It takes a lot of money to make a little bit of money being a politician. We're going to be right back with Clint. We're going to get into some emotional stuff when we come back. Welcome back to Ask an Innovator. I am here with my friend, someone I look up to very much, Clint Harris. Before the break, we talked a little bit about politics. I think I might have been pushing Clint into becoming a politician, but I'll leave it at that. I won't push him any harder. The next group of questions, we're going to talk a little bit about vulnerability, honesty. We're going to talk about religion a little bit, expectations, exercise, relationships, and reading. So, Clint, do you read?
I do.
How do you have time for reading?
Well, it's the first thing I do every morning when I get to work.
Yeah.
I'm addicted to newspapers, of course. I read them across the country, and I read my Twitter feed at least probably a couple hours almost every single night. I like to know what's going on. So,
yeah. Do you have a morning routine that you subscribe to? Is there a way to start your day so that all the dominoes fall?
Well, I start the day sort of with my dog in the backyard and making sure that she's all ready so I can leave the house. But when I get to work, and I know my fiance would laugh at this, I read the paper and file my nails so that, it seems to be what I do when I get to work, settle myself into our daily paper, and then I pretty much read 3 or 4 other sort of Canadian newspapers, check to see what they're doing and see what kind of advertising they're getting, because that's sort of what I do.
Sure.
But for the most part, it is news that I read, and I don't watch a lot of TV, so...
You don't have time to watch TV.
It's one of those things that, if I get time, it's nice to sit on the couch, but for the most part, I don't get a lot of that time. I think I'm at 300 events a year, so it's challenging to fit all of that in and drag poor Kimberly around to all these sort of events, but trying to, lower that sort of amount so that I can have some quality of life. But yeah, reading is, it's pretty much news.
It's there. It's news.
Yeah.
Fair enough. How about exercise? I know that you have boxed at a very high level.
Yeah.
Martial arts.
Yeah.
Exercise. How do you incorporate exercise into your busy schedule?
Well, currently, I go to Mavati, which is, my sort of daily routine, and I'm there 6 to 7 days a week. And
Great.
I joined this other club called Fit Ranks with Kimberly, so I go to that, 3 to 4 times a week. So
you guys do that together? You and
we do
Kimberly
it together,
do that together?
It's sort of a team-up sort of deal.
Good.
It's me and 30 other women, and I'm Kimberly's partner. So
Yeah.
apparently now I'm one of the girls, and they all talk to me and high five. It's a lot of fun. It's different than what I would normally do.
Yeah, sure.
I spent 30 years sort of involved in the martial arts, and I spent 12 years as an amateur fighter for the Weldon Gilbert Club here. And I continue to do a lot of things that I used to do. But with Fit Ranks, I've learned a lot of things that I've never done in the past, kettlebells and planking.
It's like circuit training?
It's like circuit training, yeah. So
get the heart rate up.
Get the heart rate up and, with the ropes, and there's all kinds of things that, it seemed more like an exercise class for women, but when you get into it, you learn that there's a lot of things that you should have been doing for your body as opposed to going to the gym and hitting the bars and punching the heavy bag, which I've done my entire life.
Do you feel that when you might be having a challenge in your day, do you feel that if you bring that challenge in, exercise, when you leave the gym, do you feel a bit of a weight being lifted?
Oh, absolutely. For me, I think I'd be bothered if I didn't actually get to the gym. Mentally, you're always pushing yourself to get there and get it done. And while you're there, of course, you're into your routines. But when you leave, absolutely, your body, it's a very positive influence in your body. And pushing hard and setting goals and all of those things, gym-wise and life-wise, it's the same thing. But exercise is certainly a big part of my life. And in the last 6 or 8 months, I've really taken it more seriously. And try to get out of the world of going to 300 events, saving the world one keg party at a time. Now it's more like save myself and take more time for myself.
Sure.
And
it's kind of like the analogy of the air mask falling from a plane. Put it on yourself before you put it on a loved one, because you're no use to anyone dead. You
can't take care of anybody else if you're not taking care of yourself. So for the most part, I'm doing a lot of that now, and I enjoy the Fit Ranks with the ladies.
Great.
And I enjoy going to Mavati.
I'm sure they enjoy you too.
Like now it's at the beginning, I was sort of, wondering how they thought of me, but it's a real high five sort of, everybody's involved together. So, and with Kimberly, we're partners, so it's a great thing to do together as a team and a couple. So, yeah, for me, it's a daily routine, and I think about it all the time. And when I'm done work, that's the first place I go.
The show's been around now for a few months, and I've been having a lot of fun. A word that keeps coming up in the show is what I'm now affectionately referring to as the V word. This is the vulnerability of life. How does the V word, how do you incorporate vulnerability into your life? You're a leader, you're an innovator, you're successful in many different aspects of your life. You do 300 events a year. How do you stay vulnerable? Do you need to work at being more vulnerable?
Honestly, it's what I work at for the most part. I've traveled most recently. Kimberly and I, we went to Bali, and we learned a lot about sort of their religion and the way they worship and how they think. And my son and I are most recently in Thailand. But through travel, even with my children as young, you see the despair and you see the challenges that other people have that we don't generally see. I've learned something in the last 6 to 8 months, which has been important to me. The arrogance is something that I try to rid myself of. Resenting, just about anything with resentment is a negative sort of feel in my body, and to learn to be more humble. And in my position, it's challenging because I'm out there and people expect to see me there, and you're praised for things, and they're always throwing things your way, and it's one of those things that I try to get away from now, and think more about the importance of my family, my life, my children, my fiancee Kimberly and her children, our mothers, and knowing what's more important in my life as opposed to being on the top of the podium. Where in my younger years in fighting, losing was never something that I was good at.
You were talking about we're talking about vulnerability. Now you brought up a really interesting word, which is resentment. That's a very powerful word. A friend of mine was recently talking to me about resentment pulling me into the past and fear pulling me into the future, disconnecting you from now and this moment. You talked to me a little bit about Buddhism the other day. The idea of Buddhism is really finding presence. Talk to me a little about your relationship with Buddhism and how do you feel about spirituality in general? Is it important to you as a businessman and as a father, as a partner?
It is. There's no doubt. Thailand, I spent some time with a revered sort of Buddhist, and spent some time being humble, getting on my knees and providing food to the monks that would walk down the street in my main area in Rawai. And it was awkward at the beginning, but once you learn to give and learn to respect and learn to be more humble, it's amazing the feeling that you get. I literally ended up walking down the beach with this particular Buddhist while he held my hand and spoke to me, and sat in front of him for an hour 3 times where he held both my hands and spoke to me. And as odd as it was, when you leave and you think about the things that they would tell you, and how they truly believe that living in the now is the most important, worrying about the past, worried about the future are things that just are things that you cannot change and things that you cannot control. Right. So I learned greatly that it was important to live in the present. I try to meditate at least once a day, whether it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And learning to be humble is what I've learned most. So vulnerability brings out the best in me, what I find.
Right, amazing. I love it. I love that you talked about meditation. In 30 seconds, can you describe how you meditate, what technique that you do? Because a lot of people want to do it, it's just kind of getting to it is difficult.
Well, interesting. I received an email from this. Kimberly hooked me up with this person named Sue Piver, and she sends emails out, and she does these sort of 10-minute segments. She's very kind about it because meditation is very difficult. Kimberly is a mindfulness coach, and her friend Don Blessing was teaching some mindfulness at one of the churches, and I went to a couple of mindfulness classes at the beginning, and all I could hear was the traffic outside. It was difficult to really stay in the room.
So staying focused is kind of the key, and being able to bring it back. We're going to bring it back right after the break. We're going to talk to Clint when we return about feedback and business. Thank you. Be right back. Welcome back to Ask an Innovator. We're entering our last segment. I wanted to talk to Clint a little bit about business, about marketing, about running a newspaper, about print advertising, about social advertising. Before we get into that, though, I just wanted to touch base on something we were talking about in the segment prior. Clint does almost 300 appearances a year. He said something to me very interesting yesterday on the phone about sometimes going out in public and wearing a baseball hat, so he might not get recognized, because it's important that we all have time for ourselves. So he was talking about wearing a hat to maybe not get recognized at times, but wearing many hats at all these different events. I'm sorry to put you on the hot seat, but I personally found that very, very interesting. You're a prolific guy, you're a public guy. How do you find time for yourself?
Well, it's like I say, as I was mentioning to you, my children, it started with them. They would like to go to the mall, and they say, "Dad, can you wear a hat so we don't have to stop and talk to everybody?"
Yeah,
And
this is just real.
they would carry a folding chair to Canada Day, knowing, and my son would laugh at me when he pulled it out because I'd say, "Why are you bringing a folding chair?" And he'd go, "Well, you'll see." And before I know it, I'm talking to Martin Schaefer, and he pops his chair out and plays with his Game Boy, and I just look at him and go, "Oh, you're a goof." So you find the time where you get it. So if I can get to the gym at 1 in the afternoon, I will. If I can get there at 4 in the afternoon, I will. In the evening, if I can. I mean, obviously, I have a relationship that's important to me, so you need to find those times. And I guess I've been sort of lessening my amount of time at events, and maybe allowing them to contact me more if they really need me. So trying to decrease the number of things that I go to is important, but running a newspaper and being out there and supporting the causes that we support, it's a no-brainer. I need to be there. So finding time is, you could see me at the gym just about any time of the day because there's no actual schedule for it. It's when I have a moment.
Right.
And I take those moments to, improve myself mentally and physically.
I know you as a friend. I know you as a client. I know you as someone that I look up to very much. When I talk to you, what's very interesting is that you don't really talk about work. You never talk about work. You talk about your kids. You talk about Kimberly. You talk about the things that are passionate to you. We talk about food a lot. You love to cook.
I do.
Cooking is social. What is your favorite thing to cook? And what is tell me about your interest in food.
Well, I've been cooking for my family and my children from a very young age. I started baking when my daughter was 2. We owned a house in Windsor where we had apple trees and cherry trees, and she would boss me around and she would find apples, put them in the doorway, and say, "Dad, make me a pie."
Right.
So I would just do it. So I learned a lot in the earlier days, and as living with a single mom, I could cook a roast when I was 10 years old because, you had to take care of yourself.
Out of necessity.
Out of necessity.
Right.
And my brother's a trained chef. He's been a chef in this community for many, many years. So cooking in my family has been fairly, it's a normal thing for us.
You and your brother ever have an Iron Chef throwdown?
No. My brother will admit that if you want a 5-course fine dining meal, I'm your guy.
Right.
Although he's capable at just about everything.
Sure.
It's a serious sort of thing in my world. And as you know, I love beef.
You do.
So, if the last steak that I cooked, that last Wagyu steak that I cooked, was probably one of the favorite things I've cooked in a while because it might have been the best piece of meat I've had in my life. But feeding my family, feeding Kimberly's family, and feeding anybody that will take food from me. When your fillets are on sale, I'll buy 6 packs and I just drop off meat to people.
Yeah, you do.
And
you're like meat Santa Claus.
Yes, and in my house,
365 days a year.
Pretty much. In my house, I cook every day, so I'm pretty much making a fine sort of meal every day. There's no simplicity to it. If I'm in a rush, I'll eat a can of salmon, but for the most part, I'm cooking a meal that includes 3 or 4 courses, and I love fine cuisine. Traveling to France, I learned to love foie gras and rillette, and traveling to Italy and eating all of the fantastic fresh produce and fish and things that you can get there.
Here's my best attempt at a segue. I see a lot of the food that you post on Instagram or on Facebook, mostly Facebook. The segue, talking about food to business to media to social media to print media, you post your food on Facebook. Talk about running a newspaper. Talk to me a little bit about how the newspaper industry in Thunder Bay, your newspaper here in Thunder Bay, is working with social media. Are people spending money on print advertising? Are they spending it on digital advertising? Just give us an overview of advertising in Thunder Bay.
Well, I'm proud to say that our readership has increased in the last couple of years by 11%.
That's huge. Amazing. Wow.
What we do for the community, obviously the community supports us back.
Yeah.
Citizen journalism has become a big part of our paper, where submissions and things that would never have been in the newspaper in the past are now in the paper.
Wow.
And those people who submit, like the hospital page, it runs 150 times a year. Everybody at the hospital reads it. Helping out the associations, and my friend with the Indian associations, and Prashant, and the Rag Rung people and the Rotary clubs. When you support all these organizations and they're allowed to submit their stories, there's a big interest. Having a high school column and things like that. Citizen journalism is a new sort of way with newspapers, And this local community, when you keep a newspaper very local, people are interested in it. And of course, we have, challenging sort of systematic sort of issues in our community that we need to address. So
you've had 11% growth in the last couple of years.
In readership, yeah.
In readership. Is that typical for newspapers in a similar market around Canada or the United States?
There's one newspaper that's comparable to us, and it's the Charlottetown Guardian. We are across the country, the top read readership newspapers in the country.
That's amazing. And what do you contribute that to? All the things you were saying, and maybe good management?
Keeping it
good
local.
People?
We have a solid newsroom, so that the hard news package is there. We have great editors at night that manage our CP and our AP Wire.
Right.
And the citizen journalism is where I see the growth coming from, and the continuous support to the community. We put about 4 million lines in the newspaper a year, supporting everything, right down to the ballerinas, to the divers, to the whatever club that exists. The submissions from clubs. That's and amazing. Having the opportunity of your stories in our paper.
Do you consider the success of the newspaper and the growth in readership 11%? I mean, that's a really big number considering the newspaper has been around for 100 years.
Yes.
11% for any business after being around for 100 years going the upward direction is a massive number. Is it because of innovation, do you think?
I think it's about paying attention to your community and what they need. It is their newspaper. We don't own it, the community does, and we take responsibility for what we put in it, which means I answer a lot of questions on the challenging sort of subjects. And people say, I'd love to have your job. Well, don't answer my voicemails on Monday, because we can make a lot of people upset and we can make a lot of people happy. But for the most part, if you support your community and you support the organizations who are in need, and build sort of this warmth and community caring, and allow people to have their say and their opinion and their words in our newspaper, they go and read it, and that's what we'll continue to do to grow it.
Yeah, I think that the numbers around the growth and the success say a lot. I'm going to wind things up a little bit. I wrote a few sentences that I just kind of wanted to share. Clint has taught me that innovation comes in many forms. You may be innovating and not even knowing it. Do yourself a favor, slow down. Look at what you do. Ask yourself, am I innovating? Am I pushing for change? Are today's actions pushing for a better tomorrow? I bet they are. I believe it is part of our genetic code as human beings to innovate, to identify a problem and find a solution. To find a solution within the problem is truly creative. Innovation is a simple fact of finding a solution. Mostly be positive. Remember, thoughts becomes things, so surrender yourself to great people, great ideas, and strong thoughts. Clint, you're a huge inspiration to me. These words come around the idea of finding solutions to problems and knowing that the solution to a lot of problems lies within the problem. Being as prolific as you are in our community, raising millions of dollars for our community, spearheading a newspaper that is growing rapidly is truly innovative, and I'm totally inspired.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks very much.
See you next week with Boy Roland on Ask an Innovator.